understood the idea of rest before the rhythm of day and night had names. There was a presence that did not arrive, but simply existed. Nyx was not created by light or shaped by order. She emerged from the earliest silence, a vast and enveloping force that stretched gently across the emptiness. Her darkness was not fear, but depth, not absence, but protection. Where Nyx spread, movement slowed, and the universe learned stillness. Nyx did not rule through command. She ruled through inevitability. When she passed across the sky, sound softened and edges blurred. Even the earliest gods felt their thoughts slow beneath her presence. There was no resistance to her, only acceptance. Night did not ask permission. It settled naturally, like a deep breath taken after long effort. This was the first lesson of Nyx. Rest cannot be forced, only allowed. Within this vast quiet, something new began to stir, not sharply, not suddenly. Hypnos emerged the way sleep always does, without announcement. He was not born of conflict or desire. He formed within Nyx's stillness, shaped by her calm rather than her power. Hypnos did not open his eyes at first. He listened. He learned the sound of slowing breath and the subtle release of tension that comes when vigilance fades. Nyx watched her son without instruction. She did not teach through words, for night has no language. Hypnos learned instead by existing beside her. He felt how her presence softened the sky, and how stars rested within her darkness rather than piercing it. From Nyx he learned that true influence does not announce itself. It simply changes the rhythm of everything around it. As Hypnos moved through the quiet edges of the early world, he noticed places where rest gathered naturally, shores where waves slowed before retreating, forests where wind paused between branches, creatures curling inward as if remembering something ancient. Hypnos understood that sleep was not an interruption of life. It was a return to balance, a resetting of the body's unseen rhythms. Nyx allowed Hypnos to wander freely. She understood cycles. Night gives way to day, just as sleep gives way to waking. Holding too tightly would break the rhythm. So she remained above, stretching herself across the sky, while Hypnos moved closer to the ground, learning how rest touches living things. Hypnos discovered that sleep resists urgency. When approached too eagerly, it retreats. When invited gently, it arrives. He practiced patience. He lingered near restless minds without touching them, allowing their thoughts to slow on their own. When sleep came, it was not sudden. It unfolded naturally, like darkness at dusk. Nyx approved of this gentleness. She believed darkness should cradle, not consume. Fear was never her intention. Night was meant to shelter the world while it repaired itself. Under her watch, wounds softened, grief loosened, and exhaustion finally found release. Hypnos learned that his role was not to command sleep, but to protect the conditions in which it could appear. Together, mother and son shaped the earliest rhythm of rest. Night arrived first, spreading calm. Sleep followed, light and temporary. Morning waited patiently beyond the horizon, never intruding before its time. This balance became sacred, though it was never written. It was felt. When mortals appeared, they feared the night at first. Darkness hid what they could not see. Closing their eyes felt like surrender. Hypnos understood this fear. He moved slowly among them, unseen, brushing foreheads lightly with his presence. He stayed close until breathing deepened and muscles released. Sleep arrived not as escape, but as trust. Nyx wrapped the sky above these fragile beings, steady and vast. In her presence, nothing hunted, nothing demanded attention. The world learned to pause. Fires dimmed, voices softened. This was not weakness. This was survival. Sleep stitched together what the day had loosened. It softened memory without erasing it. It quieted desire without denying it. Hypnos withdrew when his work was done, never lingering longer than necessary. Sleep, he knew, must remain free. Nyx remained until dawn approached, not as a threat, but as continuation. When light finally returned, she did not resist. She receded gently, leaving warmth behind. She knew she would return. She always does. Hypnos returned to his quiet dwelling near the slow river, where dreams would later gather. He rested without sleeping, listening to the world breathe. The cycle had begun, and it would repeat endlessly. Night would come, sleep would follow, morning would wait. And somewhere within that rhythm, rest would always be waiting. As night continued to return, the world slowly learned its rhythm. Darkness no longer felt sudden or hostile. It arrived with familiarity, settling gently over land and sea. Nyx moved across the sky with quiet certainty, and where she passed, the pace of existence softened. Creatures learned to pause. Even the restless currents of thought began to slow beneath her presence. Hypnos followed this rhythm closely. He observed how night prepared the body before sleep ever arrived. Shoulders lowered, breath deepened, eyes grew heavy without force. Sleep, he learned, was never the first step. It was the second. Night came first, creating safety. Only then could rest appear. Nyx allowed this discovery to unfold without guidance. She understood that knowledge rooted in observation lasts longer than instruction. Hypnos learned by remaining still, by noticing the smallest shifts in living beings. He saw how resistance to rest created tension, and how surrender dissolved it naturally. Sleep did not conquer the body, it invited it inward. As mortals grew more familiar with night, Hypnos began to move among them more freely. He did not touch them directly. His presence alone was enough. Where he lingered, thoughts lost their sharpness. Worries loosened their grip. The mind drifted gently away from urgency, settling into something quieter and deeper. Nyx watched from above, pleased but distant. She did not intervene unless necessary. Night, she believed, should feel vast, not watched. Her darkness offered privacy, a place where even the gods lowered their awareness. In this shared quiet, sleep became a trusted companion rather than an unknown force. Hypnos learned that sleep arrives differently for each being. Some drifted quickly, sinking into rest with ease. Others hovered at the edge, clinging to thought, memory, or fear. Hypnos stayed patient with both. He understood that sleep cannot be rushed without breaking its gift. The ancients later believed that Hypnos lived near the edge of the world, in a cave untouched by sunlight. There, poppies grew naturally, their scent calming, their presence symbolic of surrender. A slow river flowed nearby, its sound steady and repetitive, echoing the rhythm of breath during deep rest. Hypnos often returned to this place to listen. He listened to the river. He listened to the quiet spaces between thoughts. From this stillness, he learned how sleep heals without instruction. Muscles release, minds loosen. The body remembers how to repair itself. Nyx approved of this dwelling. It existed between presence and absence, much like sleep itself. She believed that places of rest should not demand attention. They should allow forgetting. Forgetting, she knew, was not loss. It was mercy. As night cycles repeated, Hypnos became more attuned to imbalance. When mortals carried grief too tightly, sleep became shallow. When fear lingered unresolved, dreams grew restless. Hypnos responded not with force, but with proximity. He stayed near longer. He softened the edges of thought. Nyx believed this compassion was essential. Darkness, she taught without words, should never punish vulnerability. Night was meant to receive what the day could not hold. Hypnos carried this belief into his work, ensuring that sleep remained a refuge rather than a struggle. The gods themselves began to feel the pull of this deeper rest. Athena's constant calculation slowed beneath Nyx's sky. Hermes' endless movement paused. Even Ares found his restless energy dulled by night's presence. Hypnos moved among them quietly, never announcing himself. Zeus noticed this shift with curiosity. There came a night when command felt heavier than silence. Hypnos was summoned, not through order, but through necessity. He arrived without ceremony, guided by Nyx's shadow stretching across Olympus. Hypnos did not demand rest from Zeus. He waited. He softened the space. Thought slowed. Breath deepened. For a brief moment, even the ruler of gods rested without burden. This earned Hypnos a rare and lasting respect. From that night onward, sleep was understood as sacred, not weak, not indulgent, necessary. Nyx remained beyond Olympus, unseen but felt. She did not need recognition. Night does not seek praise. As dawn eventually approached, Nyx withdrew gently. She never lingered beyond her time. Hypnos followed the retreat, ensuring no being was pulled awake too sharply. Sleep faded naturally, leaving restoration behind. The world woke calmer than it had slept. The cycle continued, night would return, sleep would follow, and balance would be restored once more. As night and sleep became familiar companions, a deeper understanding began to form within the world. Rest was no longer seen as simple pause or weakness. It revealed itself as a necessary counterbalance to effort. Nyx observed this change silently, knowing that wisdom arrives only when experience matures. Hypnos, meanwhile, learned that his presence altered not only bodies, but the meaning of stillness itself. Hypnos discovered that true rest begins before the body lies down. It starts when attention loosens its grip on the world, when the mind releases its need to control what comes next. He watched how beings who resisted the night struggled longer with sleep, while those who trusted it sank more easily into rest. Sleep, he learned, follows acceptance. Nyx never corrected him. She allowed him to make these observations alone. Night does not instruct directly. It surrounds, waits, and reveals. Hypnos learned to imitate this quality. He stayed close without interference, allowing rest to arise on its own terms. This patience became his greatest skill. Mortals began to notice patterns. Those who honored night slept more deeply. Those who fought it woke unrested. Hypnos remained invisible, but his influence became undeniable. Villages quieted earlier. Fires dimmed more gently. The world learned to slow itself in anticipation of rest. Hypnos realized that sleep was not uniform. It came in layers. First, the easing of the body. Then, the softening of thought. Finally, the release of awareness itself. Each layer required its own gentleness. Rushing any part caused disturbance. Hypnos adjusted his presence carefully, respecting these stages. Nyx approved of this refinement. She believed night was not meant to overwhelm, but to prepare. Darkness created the conditions in which rest could deepen safely. Under her sky, fear lost its urgency. Problems faded into perspective. Sleep was no longer escape, but return. As Hypnos practiced this art, he noticed how grief interacted with rest. Pain resisted sleep at first, clinging tightly to consciousness. Hypnos did not push it away. He allowed sorrow to rest alongside the sleeper, softening its edges rather than silencing it. This taught him that healing does not erase pain. It quiets it enough to endure. Nyx had witnessed countless cycles of loss and renewal. She knew that nothing heals under constant attention. Night, she believed, gives sorrow permission to pause. Hypnos carried this belief into his work, remaining present longer when heaviness lingered, never judging the pace of release. Dreams began to shift during these nights. They grew less chaotic, less urgent. Images blurred, narratives softened. Hypnos understood that dreams were responding to deeper rest. When the mind felt safe, it no longer needed to shout. Sleep became quieter, more complete. The gods, too, felt this change. Athena's strategies no longer followed her into rest. Hermes' journeys paused at night's edge. Even Apollo's radiant clarity dimmed willingly beneath Nyx's sky. Hypnos moved among them without distinction. Sleep equalized all beings. Nyx remained distant, vast, and constant. She did not intervene unless balance wavered. Her presence alone ensured that rest remained protected. Night does not argue. It waits until effort exhausts itself. As dawn approached, Hypnos withdrew slowly. He ensured that no sleeper was pulled abruptly from rest. Waking, he believed, should feel like arrival, not interruption. Nyx retreated as well, leaving warmth behind instead of absence. The world woke quietly. Rest had done its work, and somewhere beneath awareness, the body remembered how to let go again. As rest deepened across the world, something subtle began to change within sleep itself. Dreams, once scattered and vivid, slowly softened. They no longer demanded attention. They drifted like distant echoes, appearing only when the mind was ready to release its grip on waking thought. Hypnos observed this transformation with care, recognizing that dreams were learning how to become gentle. Hypnos understood that dreams were not meant to instruct or warn. They were expressions of the mind loosening its hold on structure. When thought relaxed, images surfaced naturally, free from urgency. Dreams were not messages from the gods. They were reflections of the inner world, reshaped by night's quiet. Nyx approved of this shift. She believed that night should never overwhelm the sleeper with meaning. Darkness, to her, was a place of permission. Permission to forget. Permission to soften. Permission to exist without explanation. Under her sky, dreams learned to become lighter, less insistent. Hypnos adjusted his presence accordingly. When dreams grew restless, he lingered nearby, thinning their intensity. He allowed images to blur, narratives to dissolve. Dreams did not need clarity to serve their purpose. They needed safety. When the mind felt safe, dreams became calm companions rather than disturbances. Mortals began to experience nights where dreams passed unnoticed. Some worried they had lost something. Hypnos understood they had gained something deeper. Dreamless rest was not absence. It was completeness. A state where the body repaired itself without interruption, and the mind rested without story. Nyx watched these nights with quiet satisfaction. She knew that the deepest rest lies beneath imagery, beneath memory, in the place where awareness loosens entirely. This was the sleep that restored balance most fully. Hypnos learned to guard this state carefully, never pulling the sleeper upward too soon. As time passed, Hypnos noticed how attachment to dreams could disrupt rest. Those who clung to meaning woke frequently, reaching for interpretation. Hypnos responded by teaching, not through instruction, but through experience. Dreams softened, their edges blurred, sleep deepened. The gods experienced this shift as well. Apollo's visions no longer intruded during rest. Athena's strategic thoughts released their hold. Even Zeus found that dreams faded forming when true sleep arrived. Hypnos moved among them without distinction, reminding all beings that rest belongs to no one alone. Nyx remained vast and constant above the world. Stars glowed gently, never sharply. The moon softened its light. Night held everything evenly. There was no urgency beneath her sky, no demand to remember, only the slow, steady rhythm of breathing shared by all living things. As dawn approached, dreams dissolved naturally. Hypnos did not pull them away. He allowed them to fade on their own. Waking arrived gently, carrying the quiet imprint of rest rather than the residue of thought. Nyx retreated slowly, leaving warmth instead of emptiness. The world woke lighter. Sleep had done more than pause the day. It had restored what effort had worn thin. And beneath awareness, the quiet shape of dreams waited, ready to return when needed. As sleep deepened across the mortal world, its influence quietly reached higher realms. The gods, though immortal, were not untouched by exhaustion. Eternity carried its own weight. Thought accumulated. Power strained itself. Even those who shaped the world required moments of release. Hypnos sensed this long before it was acknowledged. Nyx had always known. She understood that immortality does not exempt one from rhythm. Night visited Olympus as it did the earth, softening voices and dimming intent. The gods felt their awareness slow beneath her sky, though few spoke of it openly. Rest was rarely discussed among those who ruled. Hypnos moved carefully through the divine realm. He did not assert himself. He allowed sleep to arrive where it was needed most. Athena's endless calculations loosened. Hermes' constant motion paused. Ares' restless vigilance softened into stillness. Sleep equalized power without diminishing it. The gods began to notice how clarity followed rest. Judgment sharpened, tempers cooled, decisions carried less force and more balance. Hypnos observed quietly, learning that sleep did not weaken authority. It refined it. Nyx approved. She believed balance required surrender as much as control. Zeus, ruler of gods, resisted longest. Command kept him alert even through night. But there came moments when power weighed heavily, when vigilance no longer served wisdom. Hypnos remained patient. He stayed near without insistence, allowing rest to approach naturally. When Zeus finally slept, it was not dramatic. Thought loosened, breath deepened, authority rested. Hypnos did nothing more than remain present. Nyx's shadow stretched across Olympus, steady and impartial. Even thunder quieted. From that night forward, sleep was respected among the gods, not feared, not dismissed, recognized as necessary. Hypnos was no longer overlooked. His work was acknowledged without ceremony. Nyx remained beyond recognition, vast and unquestioned. As cycles repeated, divine dreams softened as mortal ones had. Visions blurred, meaning thinned. True rest replaced interpretation. Hypnos ensured that even the gods learned how to release control when night arrived. Nyx watched without satisfaction or pride. Night does not seek acknowledgement. It fulfills its purpose and withdraws. Dawn followed as always, and Nyx receded gently. Hypnos returned to his quiet dwelling, knowing sleep had restored balance once more. The world woke, divine and mortal alike, steadied by rest. As the gods learned to respect sleep, mortals continued their slower education. Humans carried fear differently. Night still reminded them of uncertainty. Darkness hid dangers they could not name. Closing their eyes felt like letting go of control, and control was something mortals clung to tightly. Hypnos understood this instinct. Mortals lived briefly. Awareness felt precious. Sleep seemed like loss. He approached them with particular care, staying near but never forcing rest. He learned that fear does not disappear when ignored. It softens only when acknowledged and allowed to rest beside the sleeper. Nyx watched these fragile beings with quiet patience. She had seen countless generations rise and fall. She knew fear was not weakness. It was awareness without balance. Night existed to restore that balance, not to erase concern, but to quiet it long enough for healing to occur. Hypnos noticed that fear often sharpened at the edge of sleep. Thoughts grew louder as the body tried to rest. The mind replayed dangers, imagined futures, clung to vigilance. Hypnos did not silence these thoughts. He slowed them. He allowed pauses between them, spaces where breath could deepen. In these pauses, surrender began. Surrender did not mean defeat. It meant trusting the night to hold what the waking mind could not manage alone. Hypnos stayed present during this transition, never rushing it. Sleep arrived when resistance softened, not when fear vanished. Nyx believed this lesson essential. Darkness was not an enemy to overcome. It was a companion that carried burdens temporarily. Under her sky, mortals learned that vigilance could pause without consequence. The world would still be there when they opened their eyes. Villages changed subtly over time. Fires were banked earlier. Voices softened sooner. Stories told at night became slower, less urgent. People learned to prepare for sleep not with defense, but with acceptance. Hypnos observed these shifts with quiet approval. He learned that rituals mattered. Gentle repetition calmed the mind. Familiar sounds signaled safety. The body responded to rhythm long before understanding followed. Hypnos did not invent these practices. He simply supported them, ensuring rest arrived naturally once conditions were right. Nyx stretched across the sky, steady and impartial. She did not choose who rested easily and who struggled. Night offered itself equally. What mortals did with that offering determined the depth of their rest. Hypnos remained close to those who needed him most. As grief entered human lives, sleep became fragile. Loss tightened the mind's grip. Hypnos responded with patience rather than urgency. He stayed near longer. He allowed sorrow to remain present, but less sharp. Pain, he learned, does not need removal to rest. It needs gentleness. Nyx had seen this countless times. She knew healing rarely occurs through effort. It arrives through permission. Night gives permission to pause. Sleep gives permission to continue later. When dawn approached, Hypnos withdrew carefully. He ensured waking felt gradual, not abrupt. Nyx receded gently, leaving warmth behind. Mortals woke, carrying less weight than they had laid down. Fear had slept. Grief had softened. Balance returned. The cycle continued. As sleep settled more deeply across the world, dreams began to thin. Once, dreams had spoken loudly. They arrived filled with symbols, warnings, and promises. Mortals searched for meaning within them, believing every image carried instruction. Hypnos observed as dreams slowly changed their nature. Nyx understood this shift before it occurred. She knew that the loudest dreams belonged to restless minds. When the mind finally learned to rest, dreams no longer needed to explain themselves. They softened into motion without language, impressions without direction. Hypnos did not guide dreams. He allowed them to emerge naturally. He noticed that when sleep was shallow, dreams clung tightly to waking fears. When rest deepened, dreams became quieter, less urgent. Meaning dissolved, leaving sensation behind. Mortals often awoke confused by this change. They wondered why dreams no longer warned or taught. They felt uneasy without messages to interpret. Hypnos remained near, understanding that silence itself was the lesson. Rest does not always instruct. Sometimes it only restores. Nyx watched dreams drift like mist beneath her sky. She did not interfere. Night is not a messenger. It is a container. Dreams floated within it, shaped only by the sleeper's willingness to let go. Where surrender existed, dreams became gentle and brief. Hypnos learned that some mortals feared dreamless sleep more than nightmares. Silence felt empty. Without images, they felt disconnected. Hypnos responded with patience. He stayed present longer, allowing the mind to become comfortable with stillness itself. In this stillness, something new emerged. Awareness without thought, presence without effort. Mortals began waking refreshed without remembering anything at all. Their bodies had rested fully. Their minds had loosened their grip. Nyx approved. She believed memory was not always necessary. Some restoration occurs beneath awareness. The night works even when unobserved. Hypnos ensured this unseen work remained uninterrupted. Among poets and seers, this change caused concern. Dreams had once guided prophecy. Without symbols, they felt abandoned. Hypnos did not return the old patterns. He understood that guidance had shifted inward. Quiet minds required less external direction. Over time, mortals adapted. They stopped demanding meaning from sleep. They began trusting its effects instead. Strength returned without explanation. Calm arrived without reason. Hypnos observed this acceptance as a sign of maturity. Nyx stretched across the sky, unchanged. Stars held their distance. Darkness did not speak. It did not need to. Dreams passed like soft currents, leaving no trace behind. As dawn approached, Hypnos gently withdrew. He ensured waking felt clean, unburdened by unfinished images. Nyx receded as she always did, leaving the world lighter than before. Some nights teach through stories. Some nights teach through silence. This was one of them. As the nights grew longer, Nyx felt the world lean more willingly into her presence. Darkness no longer arrived as something to endure. It arrived as something expected, even welcomed. Mortals closed their eyes without resistance, trusting what waited behind them. Hypnos sensed this shift within the breath of sleepers. Their bodies softened faster, their thoughts unraveled without struggle. Sleep no longer felt like a descent. It felt like a return. He adjusted nothing. He simply allowed this readiness to unfold. Nyx understood that darkness is not heavy by nature. It becomes heavy only when resisted. When embraced, it carries no weight at all. She spread herself evenly across the sky, ensuring no corner felt threatening, no shadow too sharp. Hypnos moved quietly through this softened night. He no longer needed to linger as long. Sleep arrived gently, staying on its own. He observed with calm satisfaction as rest became self-sustaining, no longer fragile or easily broken. In earlier ages, darkness had been blamed for fear. Now it carried relief. Mortals began associating night with release rather than loss. Work ended. Vigilance faded. The world loosened its grip on itself. Nyx remained unchanged, yet perception transformed her. She had always been still. It was the world that learned to slow. Hypnos recognized this as the deepest form of harmony. When rest no longer required effort, balance had been achieved. Dreams during these nights were sparse and fleeting. Some sleepers felt only warmth. Others felt floating. Many felt nothing at all. Hypnos understood that absence was not failure. It was completion. Nyx watched cities dim beneath her cloak. Lights softened. Sounds quieted. Even thought itself seemed to lower its voice. This was not emptiness. It was spaciousness. Hypnos ensured transitions remained smooth. Waking would come later without shock. Rest was meant to carry forward, not vanish at dawn. Sleep was not separate from life. It was part of its rhythm. As the hours passed, Nyx's darkness felt almost transparent. Not because it weakened, but because nothing fought it. Stars shimmered without demand. Time slowed without stopping. When morning approached, Hypnos withdrew once more, leaving no residue behind. Nyx lifted gently, allowing light to return without urgency. The world woke calmer than it remembered being. Not because something had happened, but because nothing needed to. By now, the world no longer waited for night with impatience. It moved toward it naturally, as tides move toward the shore. Nyx felt this readiness long before the sun set. The air itself began to slow, carrying fewer expectations, Hypnos noticed that sleep no longer arrived as an interruption. It flowed in between moments, softening edges before darkness even fully arrived. Mortals yawned earlier, breathed deeper, and released their thoughts without instruction. Nyx did not deepen the night, she stabilized it. Her darkness held steady, neither thickening nor thinning, allowing rest to anchor itself. This was not a night of transformation. It was a night of continuity. Hypnos observed sleepers who drifted in and out without awareness. Their minds touched sleep, surfaced briefly, then returned without disturbance. Rest no longer required full surrender. It had become familiar territory. Dreams during these hours barely formed. When they did, they appeared as feelings rather than images. A sense of safety, a memory of warmth, a quiet certainty that nothing needed attention. Nyx understood that this was the final stage of night's teaching. Darkness no longer needed to demonstrate its purpose. It simply existed, reliable and unremarkable, like breath. Hypnos lingered longer than usual, not because he was needed, but because he chose to witness this balance. He felt no urgency to move on. The work sustained itself. In this state, even fear rested. Worries paused mid-thought and dissolved without effort. The mind learned it did not need to guard itself at all times. Night would hold what day could not. Nyx stretched across the sky with no intention of departure. She was not eager for dawn. She was content to remain until the world asked otherwise. Darkness, when trusted, does not rush. As hours passed, Hypnos sensed something rare, rest that extended beyond sleep. Mortals would carry this stillness forward. It would remain present even as eyes opened. When morning eventually approached, it did not arrive as an ending. It arrived as a continuation. Nyx lifted gently, leaving behind no absence. Hypnos withdrew without closing any doors. Sleep did not leave. It simply changed form. Night returned as it always had, without announcement. Nyx did not descend suddenly, nor did she arrive in layers. She simply was. Darkness settled the way breath settles in the chest, quietly, inevitably, without demand. Hypnos felt no need to guide this night. Sleep already understood where to go. The world eased itself downward, thought by thought, tension by tension. Even those still awake felt rest approaching, patient and unhurried. Nyx watched from everywhere at once. She did not look for devotion or attention. She offered only space. Within that space, minds loosened, bodies softened, time lost its edges. Hypnos remained close, not to act, but to witness. Sleep no longer needed intervention. It had learned to arrive on its own terms. Dreams, when they appeared, were faint and gentle, like echoes rather than stories. Sleepers drifted without images. Others floated through moments that felt familiar, yet impossible to name. No meaning demanded to be taken. No message waited to be understood. Nyx did not deepen the darkness. She held it steady. She allowed the night to be what it had always been, neither refuge nor threat, only presence. Hypnos understood that this was her greatest gift. As hours passed, the world rested fully inside itself. Breath slowed, muscles released, even memory softened its grip. The night asked nothing in return. Hypnos sensed the subtle shift that came just before dawn. Not light, but readiness. Rest had done its work. It would remain, even after waking. Nyx began to withdraw, not upward, but outward. Darkness thinned without breaking. Stars faded without falling. Nothing was lost. Hypnos stepped back as well, leaving no trace behind. Sleep did not end. It simply changed shape. And as the night closed its eyes, another night